Okay. Okay, lights.
Oh, gee.
Okay, I'm going to have to I'm going to put this down so I don't get it confused. And then once we finish and you walk off, then I'll go ahead and introduce Tim Campos. John Bosco. Bright lights.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If you'll please take your seats. Well, good morning again, and welcome to Day 2 of the NASA IT Summit. Lula and I certainly hope that you enjoy the keynote speakers, the track presenters, the exhibit hall, and the reception from Day 1. And I also need to add the flash mob. The events of yesterday are still part of the chatter that we are getting feedback on, and so far the word is all good. As a reminder, we encourage you to visit the exhibit hall today and see our various industry partners, as well as the many NASA exhibits. Also, we ask that you silence your cell phones and keep conversation and extraneous noise to a minimum. These general sessions are being broadcast live and will be available on our NASA OCIO website for later viewing. We encourage everyone to continue to post comments about their experience throughout the summit using Twitter or NASA's Buzz Room using the hashtag NASAIT. For those who are watching remotely, use these tools to post your questions to the speakers. We will have a moderator who can pose some of the questions from our virtual participants to the speakers if time allows. Today's keynote lineup includes Tim Campos, Chief Information Officer from Facebook, and Andy Jassy, Senior Vice President, Amazon Web Services.
Based on your feedback, yesterday was a huge success. We thank you for your comments and your feedback. Based on the numbers, the IT Summit 2001 remote engagement was a total success. For Monday, people in 83 countries spent almost 1,100 hours watching the live stream presentations. This means that the average stream session had over 100 viewers. The top 100 countries were United States, Sweden, India, Brazil, United Kingdom, Poland, Argentina, Germany, France, and Spain. For the live call events, there were over 270 people registered. There were 4 live call sessions held on Monday with an average of 10 unique phone numbers dialed in per session. At various points during the day, the IT Summit 2010 trending on Twitter was the top in Washington, D.C., San Francisco, and Houston. It was reported on the Twitter sphere there were 8,000 posts for the hashtag NASAIT. This morning is a special time of reflection for us, moving forward from the point of the IT Summit 2010 to where we are now. As we all know, a leader is only as good as the team. Without the IT Summit Steering Committee and many of you, none of this would have been possible. Last year, within the first 2 weeks after the IT Summit 2010, we decided that we needed to move forward and start planning for the IT Summit 2011. At that point, I sent out an email message to all our CIOs, asking them for volunteers. This time, instead of asking for just 1 volunteer, we thought, well, let's just ask for 2, especially from the larger centers. And thank you to all the CIOs that you responded, that you gave us your support, and that you gave us at least 1 volunteer. And then our one CIO, Adrian Gardner from Goddard, instead of giving us 2, he actually gave us 4. And we thank you. Okay, right now we have 40 steering committee members. And I just want the steering committee members just to please stand up. We have members from every center. Okay, they're not out there. Okay, very good. Karen and I truly thank you guys for everything that you've done. We thank you, first of all, for the long hours that included your Saturdays, your Sundays, and your holidays. We thank you for your dedication. We thank you especially for showing up at 7:30 on Saturday morning to help us do all the last details to prep for the IT Summit. We thank you for working late into the night on Sunday night to make sure all the presentations were loaded. We thank you especially for volunteering your family and your friends. We thank you for lifting us up when we needed it, and without you, the IT Summit would not have been a success. And we just want a round of applause again just for all these volunteers that have come forward to work on our committee. Thank you. In addition to the steering committee, we had so many volunteers. People just came forth when we asked them to help. As of today, we had 120 volunteers. And once people told me they were coming, that they had family and friends coming, the first thing I did was like, okay, what's their name? Let me write them down, put them on the volunteer list. A lot of people got volunteered, and we really appreciate that. When my sister Wendy, my friend Paula, and my cousin Linda decided, when I was talking about the IT Summit, they got real excited. They go, okay, why don't we go to San Francisco with you? I said, okay, let's come to San Francisco. And Paula and Linda had never been to San Francisco. As of today, they've only seen it from the Marriott. But hopefully after today, they'll get out to see something. Karen's sister Loretta, she came last year to help us, and apparently we didn't overwork her too much because she actually came back. And John Bosco and I were talking, and he said, Lily, my wife's coming. So I didn't even know his wife's name, so I just wrote down on a piece of paper, volunteer, John Bosco's wife. And then my dear friend Cliff Smith, we worked together a lot, and he said he was bringing his wife and his son. So once again, his wife and his son were on the list of volunteers. Now, would all the deputy CIOs please stand? I just want to say thank you, guys. Thank you for introducing speakers. Thank you for letting me volunteer you. Thank you for accepting the invitation to introduce our featured speakers. And basically, when I sent you guys out the email to say we need your help, everyone came forth, and we truly appreciate it. And we thank you for greeting all of our participants on Monday morning, and thank you for last night when you greeted everyone that came to the reception. So thank you so very much. In addition, I would just like to thank Lockheed Martin and thank James Williams from Ames for all the support that he's given us with his civil servants and his contractors to come forth as far as the technology committee to make all of this work. Initially, we were supposed to have 2 support people from Lockheed Martin, and on Saturday morning when we got here, 8 people showed up to help us work, and we truly thank you guys. I now want to thank my CIO, Mr. Bruce O'Dell, for giving me an opportunity to co-chair the IT Summit 2011. And most of all, I want to say thank you to Ms. Linda Cureton, our agency CIO, for having the vision. So if we just give everyone a round of applause, please. Okay, this morning we're gathered here for a keynote address from Tim Campos, a business-oriented technical leader with an emphasis in enterprise systems and application hosting services. With over 18 years of industry experience in both software engineering and information technology, Tim has a unique understanding of the challenges in both developing and applying information technology. Tim is currently the Chief Information Officer at Facebook, the world's largest social network. Prior to Facebook, Tim served as a CIO and Vice President of Information Technology at KLA TenCore. Tim has a Master's in Business Administration from Columbia University and a degree in Electrical Engineering and Computer Science from the University of California in Berkeley. He is on the board of directors for the Fisher IT Center at the Haas School of Business at UC Berkeley, as well as the advisory board for several Silicon Valley startups. And now, please join me in welcoming Tim Campos.
Thank you, thank you. Morning, everybody. How's everybody doing today? I am very excited to be here. I can't.
A little too excited there.
I can't see any of you, so all I see is a wall of light. So you'll have to forgive me if I can't look you in the eyes. But I am really excited to be here. My daughter, when she heard that I was going to be speaking to a bunch of people at NASA, asked me when I was going to come back from outer space. So you have high expectations. I want to talk this morning about the role of IT and how it is changing. There's been a lot of amazing technical innovations in our industry over the last 10 to 15 years. And that is changing both the expectations from the companies that we work for as well as from our workforces. And I want to talk a little bit about what that looks like from the perspective of the company that I work for, which is Facebook. But this is not just about Facebook. This is really a trend that is going on with a number of new companies that are growing up in this age of cloud computing and other technical innovations. Let me start off with just a little bit more background about me, so you have some understanding about where I come from and what kinds of experiences have shaped my vision and thought about things. I've been in the technology industry for about 20 years. I started my career at a small database company called Sybase, which has now been purchased by SAP. And at Sybase, I learned a lot about engineering, engineering systems and how to build technology. I then moved to Silicon Graphics. Silicon Graphics in the mid-90s was one of the more innovative companies in the Valley. And at SGI, I learned a lot about moving fast and a lot about innovation. From there, I moved to my first startup, a company called Portera Systems. And Portera was actually one of the earliest software as a service companies. We didn't even call it that back then. The buzzword of the day was ASP, or Application Service Provider. And at Portera Systems, I became part of a company that was really defining the power of delivering software as a service over the internet. And I saw firsthand the benefits that this provides both to companies as well as to the suppliers that produce these services. Finally, I spent the last 7 years at a company called KLA-Tencor, which I like to say is the biggest company in the Silicon Valley that nobody's ever heard of. But KLA is actually one of several semiconductor companies which have been around in the Valley for a long time and are extremely well run. And I learned a lot at KLA about management and leadership. More importantly, I had an opportunity to really influence the changing role of IT in a decade where IT was being radically transformed by commoditization of technology. And my experience now in these companies has helped frame what my opportunities are at Facebook. Facebook as a company is a very exciting place to be because of the impact that it has on everybody's lives. But it's also a very exciting place to be because it's committed to innovation and to driving change in the industry, both from the perspective of social media, but also from the perspective of technology. And from an IT perspective, Facebook really represents the largest of the next generation, what I like to call the next generation enterprises. So let me talk very briefly about Facebook and give you a little bit of perspective on the company. As I mentioned before, one of the exciting things about Facebook is the fact that it has such an impact on so many people. And it starts because of how many of us use Facebook. Our company has over 750 million people who access the site on a monthly basis or more frequently. Those, we're starting to see a technology adopted across the planet. We can measure the adoption of Facebook in terms of percentage of connected people on the planet. That's an amazing thing. And they spend an incredible amount of time sharing information on Facebook. Every day, there are over 15 million new friendships built on Facebook. That's over 170 every second. People who use Facebook spend a tremendous amount of time on it. They spend over 700 billion minutes a month sharing information, sharing over 30 billion pieces of content every month. And this is a global phenomenon. This is not something which is just about Western society. This is something which is touching people across the planet. Facebook is published in over 130 languages, and there are just dozens and dozens of countries that have fully adopted the product. Now, why is this? Why is it that this social trend has really taken everything by storm? And if you go back and you look at sort of the history of the internet, it points to some of what's going on here. Back when the internet was very young and nascent, the way in which one would find content on the internet was through some type of content directory. Think Yahoo. A taxonomy of the internet where everything could be categorized into one or a set of tags or descriptors. And so that was possible because the number of sites on the internet really wasn't that large at that time. And Yahoo, when it first started, literally had teams of people who did nothing other than surf the web to find new content and then figure out what directory that content belonged in. And that was how they maintained it. That's how we all accessed it. But as the internet grew in terms of scope and scale, that became a very inefficient way of accessing content. And so search became the dominant way in which we started to access content over the last 10 years. Now, as we have all come to appreciate, we can now log into a browser and just type in a simple string and find anything on the internet. But the internet continues to grow in scale, and the amount of content which is on there is just absolutely staggering. I heard one statistic that in the last 3 years, there has been more content published on the internet than in all of history up until that point. And so even search is becoming an inefficient means to go and find the information which is interesting and relevant to us. And so this is where social is becoming more and more important. We are social beings. We are defined by our relationships with each other. And social has allowed us a more efficient mechanism to access the information which is interesting and relevant to us through our friendships and the relationships that we have with other people. And this is a very powerful trend which is going to affect the industry over the next 10 years. I'll talk a little bit today about how that will affect us in the enterprise context. But just as a society, this is, I think, a very exciting and transformational trend in the industry. It's having an impact on a number of different industries. This is affecting industries like gaming, Xbox, Zynga. These companies have built new experiences where we can spend time engaging with each other in competition virtually. And it makes that experience much more exciting. Zynga is not known because it has the best graphics or it has the most photorealism in its games. What Zynga is known for is the social experience. When we go and we purchase goods from companies, more and more of us will check to see what others have said about that product on sites like Amazon before we buy it. We trust each other and each other's judgments. Even news. Instead of just reading the newspaper anymore, when I wake up in the morning, I look at my Twitter feed and I look at what things other people that I know and respect are following, and I use that to find the articles that I want to see. The front page is interesting, yes, and I will read it every day. But it's the articles that are deeper in that my social graph has exposed to me that are really engaging for me. This is all happening in a time of incredible technical innovation. Both the incumbents and the new entrants are producing disruptive technologies, are having a huge impact on the technologies that we use today. Now, Facebook as a company is actually very young. The company was founded in 2004. And as you see from this graph, which just shows the adoption of Facebook over time, not only has it grown geometrically, but it continues to accelerate its pace. And that's not just in adoption. It's also in how we operate as a company. The number of innovations and capabilities that we are adding to our platform and to our product continues to accelerate. And this gets to the challenges of the next generation enterprise. How do you support this? So before I get into that, I thought that I would give you one last insight into what it's like to be at Facebook by sharing with you just a brief video that we share with our employees when they come to Facebook.
We really don't believe that you have to have a lot of experience to make a big difference. I mean, look at me, right? I mean, I started this from college, so be bold, right? I mean, don't just make the conventional decisions, but think about how can we do something in a different way than everyone else has? Because, what we're trying to do is different than what everyone else has done before.
There were 20 great photos products around in 2005 that had millions of dollars in cash, that had the backing of Google and Yahoo and Microsoft, that had hundreds of features. And here we came along with a handful of people in a month and a half and built a product that boiled down and removed all of those features, except for one thing, which was tagging it, so that we organized the photos on the web around people and it completely changed the experience. That was just like that.
It's like out of your brain and your ideas and a small group of people comes something that touches the lives of hundreds of millions of real people every day.
No matter how big this company gets, it has this David versus Goliath sort of feeling. And I think that's what makes it fun to come into work every day.
Get out there and try something. And don't be afraid, there's lots of people to catch you, and you will never get criticized for trying something for the right reasons and making a mistake.
Most things at Facebook don't happen because it's mandated at a top level. It happens because there's an individual in the company who really wants something to happen, who has that deep passion to kind of figure out all the subtle product decisions that go into making a product beautiful and elegant.
What we're trying to do as a management team is encourage people to see the gap. And that requires being critical and being extremely imaginative.
You can work on huge problems, or you can come up with your own problem and work on that, and you can really have a big impact. It's really early, right? I mean, if you look at the type of information that people share, it's all very simple, right? And the amount of context that people can have about the world around them, the type of sharing that people want to be able to do, the type of things that you want to be able to learn about people around you, it's really just getting started. Come into work with a sense of urgency about what we're doing. Even if it seems like it's a simple task on a day-to-day basis, getting it done is the thing that lays the groundwork for everyone else to do the other things that they're doing so that it all adds up to something huge. We're not just optimizing to make the most profitable company. We want to do something that's really good in the world.
I see all the things that Facebook has done, from people who have donated organs to complete strangers, to people who have adopted babies through Facebook, to people that have fought for peace in elections like the Iranian election. What I see are individuals connecting. And no matter what your job is here, Whether you're in, user operations dealing with users, or engineering where you're coding the site, or sales where you're opening a new sales office in a new country, it doesn't matter because we're all here to serve exactly one purpose, which are those human connections which happen every day through Facebook.
We're so far, far, far away from the vision of what this could be, which is everything you use and everything you interact with, all the websites you use, the devices you use, they just feel like there's people there. And they're conduits to people that you know and that you care about. And that is an intense, compelling thing that we are out and on the verge of creating. For the first time ever in history, there's people in a database. And that means that we can build all these new kinds of experiences. And the difference between where we are and what's there, I think, is a handful of people with a sense of determination and a really powerful imagination.
So hopefully that gives you just a brief glimpse in terms of what it's like to be in this type of environment. And while Facebook is certainly unique in its scale, how quickly it's grown, in terms of the characteristics of how it thinks about information technology and productivity of its employees, I assert that it is not unique. I assert that this is the next wave in terms of how companies will be using IT. And so I'd like to spend the rest of the time this morning talking about that. And so let me begin with a few statements about how I assert these types of environments are different. And again, as I mentioned before, while Facebook is an example of this, if you look at the valleys, the companies that are being built in the Silicon Valley, they all exhibit these same types of characteristics. So if we look at some of the things that are different, let's just start with some of the basics for an IT organization. The mission. What is the purpose of the IT organization? For a long time, for the last 10 to 15 years, the emphasis has really been on minimizing costs for the company. And in many places, that emphasis has really been around minimizing IT cost. Now, in a sense, this makes sense. From the 80s to the 90s, there were such rapid innovations that there was, to be quite frank, an overinvestment in IT during that time. And so it made sense for companies to begin to have a focus on how to drive those costs down, and then eventually to focus on how they drive costs down elsewhere in the business. But there's only so much blood you can squeeze from a stone, and eventually, we have to return back to our core mission and purpose. And the reason that information technology exists is to drive productivity for the companies and the organizations that we work for. And that productivity and efficiency is, an emphasis on that is changes a number of other areas. Let's take platform strategy as an example, the platforms that we develop against. In a world where all we care about is minimizing costs, then what you want to do is you want to standardize, standardize, standardize. Because any variance to the standard is cost. But in today's world, choice is increasingly important. And I'll talk a little bit more about choice in a second. When you look at some basic things like support and the type of support that we provide for people, in a traditional enterprise that is focused on cost, what you really want is to provide something that is minimally effective, and more importantly, cost effective. But in a next generation organization where you're focusing on employee productivity and efficiency, that's not good enough. It's got to be impactful. It's got to be awesome. If we look at things like systems architecture, in an environment where we're focused on driving cost out, we want to go for commodity technologies that everybody else is using, and we want to minimize customization. But in a world where we're driving for productivity and efficiency, there are areas where we all differentiate, whether we're NASA IT, Facebook IT, KLA 10-Core IT, or the IT departments of others. And the role of IT leadership is to go find out what those areas are that we need to differentiate in, and embrace customization, embrace differentiation in those areas. Customization allows us to deliver services which are unique and differentiated, where they create value. We can commoditize and standardize on the areas where they don't. But where they create value, let's embrace these things. And then finally, the world is moving faster and faster and faster. And so the traditional waterfall implementation methodologies are no longer sufficient in order to keep pace. We have to be productive ourselves, and so an agile-based methodology is important. So the themes to address these characteristics that I want to focus on are first off choice and the role of choice, or we could call this consumerization of IT if we like. The second is cloud-based delivery of IT services. The third is an emphasis on innovation. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about the role of social in the enterprise. Let's start with choice. Today's workforce is incredibly experienced with technologies. These people coming in, whether we're talking about the younger generation, which has grown up with iPods and MP3 players and access to the internet, and or even the experienced employee who's been working for 20 years. They know technology. They use it at home. We all have it. When employees come into IT departments and the IT department has made all decisions for them, the IT department basically is taking on a bunch of responsibility now. When we embrace choice, we allow workers to use the technologies that they're most familiar with, they're most comfortable with, and they're most productive with. And so in an environment where we care about productivity, even where it creates a little bit of cost for the IT department, choice is actually incredibly empowering. Now at Facebook, when you come to the company, the first thing that you are asked is, do you want to run a PC? Do you want to run a Mac? Do you want to run a BlackBerry? Do you want to run an iPhone? Do you want to run on AT&T? Do you want to run on Verizon? We embrace choice. Choice is something which helps to empower our workers. And it is a gateway to an additional element, which is allowing employees to deal with issues themselves, to be in the business of providing a lot of self-service. Now, if they're using the technologies that they know, that they're productive with, that they like, they also know how to support the basics on it, so we don't have to deal with those things for them anymore. That allows the IT organization to focus on more interesting and strategic elements. So we also allow employees to choose the software that they want to run. We do standardize a bit on collaboration technologies, but should an employee need Microsoft Visio or some technology, it's very easy for them to go off and access that themselves. They don't have to engage the IT department in order to do these things. We've taken it even one step further. We look at, let's look at some of the traditional domains of IT. And let's face it, we still do need to focus on cost efficiency. If we look at things like cellular, a lot of companies will manage cellular costs by telling employees that you have to take care of the phone, and you can only expense up to a certain amount. And that creates an incredible disincentive both to use the technology appropriately. It also is just inefficient. And you have expense reports to manage, and why is this better? So what we have done is something a little bit more innovative, where we pay for the cellular phone for the employee, but we share with them the bill. We also give them the bill in context. We tell them, this is what your spend is, this is what the average spend is in your department, the average spend within the company. We give the same report up to the manager, and we also tell the manager, well, who are the top spenders in their department. And through this, we empower the employee to make their own choice on how much they should spend. And you know what? If your employees are aligned with the objectives of your company, they'll make the right decisions. And then what the IT department can focus on instead is not instilling draconian practices, but rather we can then safely and comfortably embrace a platform like mobile that we then give out to our employees that we can use in a lot of other ways. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. This other monstrosity on the right here is the final example that I have on choice. One of the things, I'm not sure if you picked up in the video, is that Facebook has a very open floor plan. There are no cubicles, there are no offices at Facebook. There's a lot of reasons for this. It certainly is efficient. We can put a lot of people in a building this way. It facilitates collaboration. There's downsides to it too. It's noisy, and so employees need access to things like power supplies and headphones and to escape the noise. And we're also a technical company, and so we consume a lot of technology. Whether we're talking about memory sticks or keyboards, things like that. And so again, to empower employees to have access to the things that they need to make them productive, we give them these accessories, and we account for them by sticking them in a vending machine. So when an employee needs access to something, they just badge into the vending machine, and then it will dispense whatever it is that they need. And the vending machine will tell them how much the device costs. It's not going to charge them personally, but it allows us to share with the employee what the cost is to the company. And again, they'll make the right choice. So choice is a powerful thing for an IT department to embrace. And the benefits of it are it helps to drive employee satisfaction and productivity. It makes them more engaged with us. They then participate in what are the options that the IT department should share with them. And I assert that ultimately this does lower support costs, especially when you factor in the fact that a lot of some of the basics the employees already know how to do. And so if you give them the technologies that they're comfortable with, that they already know how to use, that you'll drive your support costs down. So the second thing I want to talk about is cloud-based delivery of information services. I would assert that cloud computing is probably the most transformative change to IT that has occurred within the last 10 to 15 years. And many people who've been around for a while would assert that it's not really anything new, that you go back to the days of the mainframe and time sharing, and it's really kind of the same thing. And probably in characteristics they're right, but what's different about cloud computing today is how easy it is to adopt it as an organization. And if you think about something like a CRM environment, you don't necessarily need an IT department to go and set up Salesforce.com for a sales organization. Employees can just, or a company can go off and implement and adopt that without having an IT department. So that changes the role of IT. If you look at companies that are emerging today, they have no legacy, and therefore they can choose from what's available in the market. And cloud services have evolved to a point where a company can really run its entire environment in the cloud without having to have any of this stuff internally and on-premise. And Facebook is no different from this. 70% of our information services, our internal information services, exist in the cloud. They're either software as a service-based technologies or custom systems that we built using a platform as a service technology. The things that we have that are on-premise are either there for strategic reasons or because these are sort of the last bastions of technology that have yet to really get fully migrated to a cloud-based service. And I know many startups that have nothing on-premise. They have no email servers. They have no internal development servers. They have no on-site ERP or accounting systems or workforce management systems. Everything that they have is in the cloud. This changes the structure of the IT organization. When I was at KLA-Tencor, over 55% of the organization was focused on infrastructure, taking care of network, taking care of servers, taking care of the data center. At Facebook, I don't have to think about these things at all. It allows the IT organization to focus on business results, not the implementation of the technology. It provides some inherent scale. And more importantly, it helps to make the IT organization more agile. Because a whole swath of problems that we have to deal with that consume our time and our management attention become the domain of companies and organizations that can do these types of things in scale for thousands of customers, far more effectively than we can do collectively by ourselves. Now, this next topic is one of my favorites, and that is the role of innovation in IT. Innovation is at the heart of Facebook as a company. But I would assert, whether or not it is a part of the organizations that you support or the companies that you work for, that it is a core attribute that should be associated with information technology. That in the end, if we're driving productivity and efficiency for people, for our organizations, that we need to be thinking about doing that in new and differentiated ways. We need to be innovative in that. But it starts with an important cultural characteristic. And that is that you need to be tolerant of failure. Failure is the critical ingredient to creating an innovative culture. Now at Facebook, we post these signs all over the place. There's actually several other ones. I couldn't even build a slide with all the different examples of how we encourage people that it is okay to fail. You heard our VP of Engineering, Mike Schrepfer, talk about it in the video. It's okay to make mistakes. It happens. We want you to try things in differentiated, new, and innovative ways. And if it doesn't work out, but it was the right type of test, more importantly, if you learn from it, that's okay. So fail. Don't be afraid. Go try. Go do something different. Move fast and break things if you have to. These are the things that we tell our employees. And it is incredibly empowering. It is what allows them to think creatively. Because if they were to be fearful of this, if they were to operate in an environment where they think that they must execute perfectly and flawlessly, they will only adopt the tried and true. And the tried and true is by definition not innovative. That's what everybody else already knows and is already doing. So this is an important characteristic which, as leaders, we need to empower our organizations to have. Now, I would reject an assertion that this has to exist within your company in order for you to be successful in that. There's a lot of innovation that I drove at KLA-Tencor, and certainly I was not given the charter to fail as the CIO of that company. But it's incumbent on us to facilitate that culture. And we can. We're empowered to do that. Now, one of the other things that we do at Facebook to help facilitate innovation is the concept of a hackathon. And the core idea here is basically just to spend time. Usually it's an all-night coding session, doing whatever it is that you feel is interesting and important. It doesn't necessarily have to be product related. One of the hackathon projects that somebody built at the company was a standalone video console machine. The purpose of a hackathon is just to get together and hack, be innovative, come up with new and cool ideas. And everybody participates in these things. As the company has grown, more and more business functions have participated, and even our executives will participate in these hackathons. Now, the hackathon has no specific business purpose. It's not something where we're going to go and solve this one problem. These are just ideas that people want to work on. They post them on a wiki, and as we schedule the hackathon, people who are interested in those ideas will gravitate towards those teams. People may or may not necessarily know each other, and they work together on solving that problem. And because there's no expectation out of this, it allows people to be innovative. It allows them to try different ways to do things. If your hackathon project turns out to be a complete dud, and either nobody's interested in it or you can't get it to work, so what? You lost a night or a couple nights of effort. But what it does do is it helps to facilitate creative thinking, creative time. Google has a similar thing with their 20% time. We've also got Hack a Month, where you can spend a month focused on something other than what your core job responsibility is at Facebook. These are all different ways that you can enable the white space to allow these creative ideas to come through. So those are the cultural things. Let's talk about something a little bit more specific. One of the things that's going on at Facebook right now is we're moving campuses. We are currently housed in Palo Alto, California, and we recently bought Sun's old campus in Menlo Park. And as the company grows, we're basically moving out of our space in Palo Alto and over to Menlo Park. But there's going to be a period of time, which we're in now, where the workforce is in multiple buildings. And to facilitate getting people from point A to point B, we shuttle them around on buses. So one of the hackathon ideas that came up within the IT organization was, hey, it'd be really cool if we could know exactly where the buses are so you know when to go out to go wait for them. We should come up with an application that somehow gets a GPS feed off the bus and then displays it. And since people are going to be all over the place, we should make that a mobile application. So they came up with this idea of Facebus, which is this web-based app to tell you where the buses are. And the core business value here was, do I wait or walk? Can I stay at my desk for an extra 5 minutes because the bus isn't there yet? So Facebus was a hackathon project. Took us a couple nights to build, and probably another 2 or 3 weeks after that to really stabilize it and make it work. And it sounds really cool and innovative, right? Well, guess what? It completely flopped. It's still around today, but the company doesn't have the type of adoption on that we were hoping for. Now, in the traditional environment, you can say, oh my God, that was failure. We wasted time. Let's go figure out who is accountable. Let's hold them accountable. But in an innovative environment, you say, all right, well, cool. That sucks that it didn't get adopted, but what can we learn from this? Well, this was our first foray building a mobile application. And we learned quite a bit about the concept of friction in the context of mobile, about what happens when you can't get a strong wireless signal. All these things that help us moving forward to bring more mobile applications into the enterprise. So yeah, Facebus has not, at least yet, been a wild success, but the benefits to the IT organization of spending time on this have been tremendous. It has helped to seed the skill sets necessary for our next hackathon project, which we're just about to roll out, which is a recruiting app built on an iPad. And the business problem we're trying to solve here is just make it so when we interview people, and we interview a lot of people at Facebook, we capture the feedback from the interviewer immediately, rather than waiting for them to go back to their desk, or worse, to take a week to go and send an email to the recruiter to say whether or not they like the candidate or not. This allows them to get that gut check right away. And it's because of the past failures that we're able to do this, because we've picked up the skills, we've picked up the issues around user interface development, around how you build apps on iOS, on the benefits of HTML5 versus a native app. It's because of all those things that we're able to move forward. And that kind of gets to the final benefit of innovation, is that it allows you to continue to iterate until you get to that successful product. And if you look at Facebook just itself, the company, the product, from 5 years ago, it has iterated tremendously. And there's been a lot of failures that the company has had, of product initiatives that just didn't work out the way that we want them to. But they've helped us build the next product. And that's a big part of why Facebook is so successful today. The last thing that I want to talk about is social, and this is probably the most interesting. Of course, I work at a social media company, and so I have to spend some time touting the benefits of social and how it's going to affect us. What I like to talk about is the area that is most relevant to me, which is the use of social within the enterprise, not just in the consumer space. Now, social is about connection. As I mentioned earlier, what is engaging and exciting about Facebook is it allows you to share information with people that you know and trust and respect and enjoy collaborating with. And those characteristics all hold true in the enterprise. It's because companies are built around people. People are what make things go. So how do we make people productive? Well, if you look at how companies are organized, they're organized in a very hierarchical fashion. A team reports to a manager, and that manager reports into a director, and he reports into a VP, and so on and so forth. And this, in many respects, goes back to the days of some of the best run organizations in the world, which is the military. You need this hierarchy in order to get things done. This is the chain of command. But in today's world, especially in the knowledge-enabled world, this isn't really how things work. That's not how we get things done. When you get together on a team because you're buying a company or because you're working on an ERP deployment or whatever, you've got representation from multiple functions, from HR, from finance, from IT, from engineering, from all different parts of the company. The graph of relationships, just to do work, is a lot messier. How business is done is not how business is organized, is basically the key takeaway here. And this is where social is going to have an impact on the enterprise. So I want to share a few examples of how this works within Facebook. Facebook is not in the business of delivering an enterprise social product. But this might give you some hints into things that will affect us in the future. Let's start with some basic things. Organizational charts. That hierarchy is important. When you go to learn about somebody in the company, you need to know where they sit, who they report to, what's their role, what's their function. And so Facebook has, like everybody else, an online directory that allows you to see where an employee sits within the organizational chart. But more importantly, we link into an internal Facebook page. And in that internal Facebook page, there's a bunch of information about that employee, which is very important and relevant. Things like how long have they been with the company, who reports into them, a link to their public Facebook profile, so I can go see a little bit of information about this person's background and who are the people that we know, and did we work together at a previous company. I can also see in this internal Facebook page the tasks they're working on, the discussions that they've created, all the things that are about them within the enterprise. So when I go into a meeting with somebody I don't yet know, I can actually fill my brain with a bunch of information about them, which helps me work more effectively with them. Here's another simple example, group collaboration. How do we collaborate today, for the most part, as companies, is through email. Email, by some definitions of social, is probably the first social networking system. But it's a horrible system. It provides no filter. It's incredibly spammy, and if any of you are like me, it's probably your biggest challenge as a knowledge worker, is how do I deal with this flood of email that I get every single day? We use our own product. We use Facebook groups to share information with each other, to make decisions, and we use this to offload email, to eliminate meetings. When I come in, I've got different Facebook groups for different contexts. We've got a Facebook group for the IT organization. We have Facebook groups for asking questions within the company. We've got Facebook groups for certain product initiatives. So if I want to find out what my organization would like to hear from me in my weekly Q&A, I just post it to my Facebook group and post a question. People can not only put their responses on what they're interested in, they can vote it up. They can tell each other what they're interested in, and they can collaborate on that. One of the first things that I did when I came to Facebook was to send communication out to the company about our email infrastructure and why we use the technology that we do and what we were doing to make it better. And I touched a nerve with this communication. Unfortunately, I sent it out as a group, as a discussion, which is an internal version of groups for us, which allows me to not only get the feedback from people on who likes or doesn't like the comments that I made in my email, but more importantly, with this discussion where I got, well over 200 or so responses, I could see who was really passionate about email as a service and what they really, really didn't like about it. And I could see where they were in the company. I could connect specifically with those individuals so I could follow up with them on how we can make things better for them. And it was a far more effective way of having that discussion than a broadcast email with a bunch of reply alls would have been. Because the people who were interested in this topic could see the responses of everybody else who was interested in those topics, but everybody else who wasn't interested could just move on their very day. The last one, which is probably most interesting, is how we do performance reviews at the company. We've worked with a third-party company called Ripple to develop a very social employee development system. And what it allows us to do, to go back to that earlier slide where I showed that the enterprise social graph does not look like the org chart. It allows us to capture that information from the enterprise social graph for the purpose of providing feedback on employees. And this is actually incredibly powerful. So, the concept that we're all probably familiar with is this idea of the 360. But typically the 360 is set up where you have your employees give you feedback, you have your peers give you feedback, and you have your management give you feedback. And the 360 audience is usually picked by the manager. With our social performance management system, yes, the manager still has the ability to do that, but the employee really is the one who can drive it. The employee can say, hey, I worked with Frank over in the infrastructure team, or I worked over with Cindy in the finance department, and I want her feedback on my performance review. So I'm going to invite her into my loop. And now she can provide me feedback. She can tell me the feedback, or it can go straight to my manager if she wants to say something that she'd like my manager to see that I don't want to see. And more often than not, she'll tell me directly because that's the culture of the company, and that's the more type of authentic communication that we want to encourage within the company. And then people that I work with that I might have forgotten to invite, they can also offer their feedback for me on this tool. So it's a very powerful way to facilitate a sense of self-accountability, that we're accountable to each other, not just to my manager. I mean, yes, my manager will be the one who ultimately makes a decision on what my performance review is going to be. But the input is heavily weighted towards the people that I work with. And this is a truly social-enabled business process. And it's the first of several that I think that you we'll start to see over the coming years as companies start to embrace social as a strategy internally. All of this is enabled by capturing the enterprise social graph, by knowing who it is that I work with, not just who I report to or who reports to me. So my takeaways for you on this are that next generation enterprises are not just the domain of big flashy companies. This is where we are all going. And whether NASA and the other organizations here represented adopt these characteristics tomorrow, next year, or 10 years from now, these are all characteristics that we're all going to be focused on. And I hope that I've given you a few ideas to think about in terms of how to lead and manage your IT organizations to help embrace and deliver next-generation IT to these types of organizations. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation, and I think we have a few minutes for open Q&A. Thank you.
Hi. Can you tell me, do you have a lot of lawyers in your company?
I think no more than any other company does. Facebook certainly has had its fair share of very public lawsuits, but the unfortunate aspect of technology today is that it is increasingly not just a game of execution and how we're all delivering technology, but it's also intellectual property ownership and protection. And so any organization, whether you're talking about Facebook or any other high-tech organization, has to include a strong and competent team of lawyers to help deal with these types of issues. And I think the most striking example of this is Google's purchase of Motorola this week, which in large part is a play on intellectual property rights. So I don't think we're any different than any other company on that front.
How confident are you that the personal data that everyone posts to Facebook can be protected?
This is actually really important for us. The company is extremely focused on the protection of employee information, user information. And that is more important than anything else. We have different classifications of data, and the consumer data that we have on the site is really the most important thing that we have to protect. So I'm very confident in the security team that we have at the company that is very focused on dealing with external threats as well as internal threats to that information, and the practices and policies that we have to protect this type of information. So to answer your question, I'm very confident in what we have to protect that information today.
Hi, Tim. Tamara Hall from Gartner. I have two questions for you. One, as a CIO in an IT product and services company, your role as a CIO, to what degree are you serving your internal Facebook employees? And what degree are you supporting the innovation of the product and services of the company? And the second thing, you haven't mentioned kind of the virtual workforce, and given that Facebook supports a very social virtual connection, but when I see pictures, I see the importance of getting the team together. How does that really support your innovation culture?
So those are awesome questions, thank you. So on the first one, the role of the IT organization, and therefore my role, is focused on the internal productivity and efficiency of the company. Our product development and our infrastructure to support Facebook, the site, is the domain of our engineering organization. And there's a lot of very exciting technologies that they are focused on using to build and manage that from the data center all the way up. But the role of the IT organization is not to deliver the Facebook service, but rather to focus on the productivity of not just employees, but also business functions. So we do look at things like, how do we make those data centers more efficient and effective? How do we drive efficiency within the repair process? How do we make it easier for us to support more and more servers with the same number of people? To your second question on the virtual workforce, Facebook historically has been a very California-centric company. But as we grow more global, this is something that we face, as I would guess that all of you already do today, that our workers are everywhere. And I think one of the most exciting technologies there to facilitate collaboration, in addition to social, I think social is a very important aspect of that, is the role of video. So whether you're talking about desktop video conferencing or high definition video conference units, telepresence, or the combination of all of the above, that I think is a core ingredient of collaboration of the future. But social is also an important aspect of that, because typically when you're collaborating on something, you're trying to share ideas and get your points across, which doesn't always happen in synchronous fashion, which is where you need that face-to-face engagement. And one of the things that I found really interesting about Facebook when I got there is the adoption of social internally has really helped to move the water cooler conversations from the water cooler onto a system. And what's interesting about that is it's more engaging. You get more people participating in those conversations.
Does Facebook as a company use any novel, socially based technology to handle your project and task management?
A lot of what we use for project and task management is actually internally developed. If I go back to one of the things that I said in the slides, one of the things that's really important for companies to do is understand what are the business processes that really differentiate them. And those are the business processes that are worth embracing with customization and differentiated technologies. That's one of the characteristics, I would say, that differentiates Facebook. We move fast and we collaborate very effectively as teams because we've got the systems internally to share and distribute tasks across the entire organization in a consistent manner, which allows for the right type of follow-up. And so we use an internally developed system to manage that.
I would like to ask you, those of us who are involved in academia, trying to educate the workforce of the future, what is the role that Facebook would play on this?
Well, that's a very deep question. I could probably go on. That's almost worth an entire talk. So I'll just give you a couple thoughts that come to mind. First off, if I look at social media as a tool, I think the role that social can play in education is incredibly powerful. I mean, the benefits of social networking is that it facilitates a closer dynamic between people when they're not physically in front of each other. And what better context to do that in than the classroom environment. But the other thing that I would say to your question is that if you look at the workforce of the future, it's an incumbent on all of us to make sure that academia is training our workforce so that they are productive in the type of environments and the type of roles that we have for them. And I think that there's probably room for improved collaboration there, not just between Facebook and academia, but really all technology companies and academia.
I would like to know whether our classroom, how we deliver instruction will change, and what the role of Facebook may be in the teaching of the future.
Yeah, and I think that the answer to that is still evolving. There are certain issues that need to be understood in order for, there was a recent article about Missouri school district which forbade its teachers to become Facebook friends with their kids, and I think the prime focus there was protection of the children from something nefarious happening. And those are certainly important issues to take care of. And so I think those types of things still have yet to be worked out. What is the exact nature of the relationship between, say, a teacher and their students? But regardless of how that ends up working out, and it will be worked out, I'm very confident, I do think that in the classroom of the future, the classroom 10 years from now, you will have a social environment where the students are all friends with each other, that they have some type of relationship with the teacher or with the professor, and that becomes the dominant way in which they share ideas, and that may or may not span the duration of the class. That may be something where you maintain that relationship into perpetuity, or it may be something which only makes sense for the duration of that class. Those are the types of things that I think are still kind of getting figured out.
Hi, I appreciate that. I'm a teacher. My name is Lori Bradner. I teach at the Central Florida Aerospace Academy. Going global, one of the things I noticed in all of your slides from talking to CIOs and the diversity officers is the tremendous amount of diversity that I saw in your company, and the average age, which is looked to be about 32 or 33. We've got a lot of industries that are represented here where the baby boomers are going. We've got to fill that. What would you say to these other companies? What is the key to your success? How do they attract the future generation?
So it's interesting that you asked that question, because my move from KLA to Facebook, there were many attributes of it where it really felt like I was going from one opposite extreme to the other. So KLA is very structured and very organized corporation, and Facebook is very much unstructured. KLA is very much tops down, Facebook is very much bottoms up. From a demographics perspective, KLA is an older company. The average age of a KLA Tinker employee is about 46 years old, and it increases by 1 year every year. And the average age of Facebook employee, I don't know the exact number, but if it's not in the low 30s, it's probably in the high 20s. Part of this is, I think it's incumbent on us to attract this talent, help them see what the career opportunities are. When we do things like develop workforce plans where we are reliant on experience and we don't allow for the creation of that experience, then we create an environment where you're not going to, as a kid right out of college, that's not going to be an attractive destination for you. You're not even going to necessarily be offered a job. As a company at Facebook, we do a lot to recruit younger talent. We go to academia and we recruit interns every summer. We had our largest intern class ever. It was well over 400 interns that we had spend 3 months with us this summer developing features on the site, and we empower them. And these interns are excited about the opportunity to work at Facebook, not just because it's cool, and yes, that's a part of things, but because they're empowered to do something that they feel is important. And I think those characteristics are somewhat, at least from my past experience, I think they're somewhat foreign to the institutions which are a little bit more mature. That for a long time, in the interest of cost cutting, we have eliminated those entry-level positions or offshored or outsourced them, and we've cut off that vehicle now to bring in younger talent who ultimately will succeed us in running our organizations. But that's not an irreversible decision. That's something that we choose to do every single day. And so I invite all of us to think really long and hard about that. If you look at it from a macroeconomic perspective, younger people have the highest unemployment rate in the United States right now. And we need to really give these people opportunities to develop and shine. And I don't know about each of you and what your personal experiences are, but for me, I didn't get here because I knew everything in the jobs that I had. I got here because there were people who made the decision to bet that I could figure it out and gave me those opportunities. And I look for all the opportunities myself personally to give back those opportunities to others.
We have time for one more question.
This question is from online. If NASA or another organization were to attempt a hackathon, what advice would you give?
Don't have any expectations on what you're going to get out of it. Seriously. That the brilliance of a hackathon is that there's no success criteria. Therefore, by definition, it can be fully successful. And what you're really trying to go for is white space, is creativity. Let people do whatever it is that they want. And then let the best ideas come out of it. Now, there is a corollary to the hackathon. Once you're done with the hackathon, we have what's called a prototype forum. And in the prototype forum, you show off what you hacked up. And this is really the incentive of the hackathon, to do something impactful and incredible, because you get to stand in front of a community of your peers, demonstrate to them what they've done. And there's no competition here. There's no, there's no prize or something like that, other than everybody who presents gets a T-shirt and a hackathon poster. And those things are, badges of honor that you get to wear with you, that you participated in that. But none of this comes from expectation that, we're going to go and make the company more efficient or more productive tonight because of this hackathon. I have no idea what's going to come out of it, so just don't have expectations.
Okay, thank you so very much.
Thank you very much for having me this morning.
Okay, and now we're going to have the morning break. It's going to be moved upstairs close to the exhibit hall. So please, while you're up there, take time and go in the exhibit hall and see what they have to offer. Thank you.